Hello everybody, this is Albert with Green Tea House. I hope you're doing well today. Today we're going to start a series on caffeine and tea. And today we're going to talk about in a two-part series, things that affect your caffeine level in tea. Now before we begin, if you haven't done so already, please come and visit us at the tea store. If you're in Central Texas, we're in New Braunfels, Texas, a growing town. Also, if you're not coming here and you haven't done so already, please subscribe and hit the notification bell so these episodes come fresh to you. We do three episodes a week. And lastly, post a comment. So, caffeine. We've talked about this before, the fundamental difference between caffeine and the Arabica and Robusta coffee beans as opposed to Camellia sinensis. So we're not going to spend much time on that. What we're going to talk about in this four-part series is things that affect caffeine levels in Camellia sinensis. We're going to do a two-parter on that, and then an episode on how do we raise caffeine in our tea and how do we lower caffeine for those of you who want to lower it. Caffeine affects the body different. Now, what are the two reasons that caffeine even exists in a lot of plants? I don't want to say a lot of plants, but we know that yerba mate from South America has it, yaupan, a shrub that grows here in North America has it, and of course coffee, the cacao, where chocolate comes from has it, and some other ones. So caffeine in the tea plant it serves two purposes. One, it serves as a pesticide. So in other words, insects won't nibble on it. The other one is it helps serve the memory or help retrieve the memory of the insects that pollinate the tea plant. We won't really think about it, but the tea plant does have buds. It actually does have buds that need to be pollinated for it to grow somewhere else. So that's the main reason we have caffeine. Now, caffeine, estimates show that about 90% of the world drinks caffeine daily. Most of this, despite what you might think about living here in America, most of this is because of tea. You think of China, we think of India, you think of Indonesia, Vietnam, these places. Tea. But it is the largest, most used psychostimulant in the world. And it is metabolized differently than coffee. We're not going to spend time on that. Go to that episode. I'll put a banner up here. But let's look at the tea plant, or what are factors that affect caffeine. Now, some of these are going to be really insignificant. Not insignificant, but not as important. And other ones will be things that you can control a lot. Some of these things you really can't control. Okay, so number one, and these are in no particular order, where in the tree are we getting the leaf? Now, we know like all plants and trees, there's got to be new growth, there's got to be buds, and then there's also mature growth. So in short, if the tea leaves are coming from the buds, the baby buds, they're going to have more caffeine. Why? Because those, going back to how caffeine serves as a pesticide, those little buds are more vulnerable to pests. They're smaller, they're growing, they need to get to mature level, they're going to have more caffeine. So teas that come from the buds will have much more caffeine than leaves that have been mature, maybe have been matured for years. Right? They've been on this plant. We know that Camellia sinensis can grow to be a gigantic tree if you leave it alone. Go to Southwest China, you'll see them. But normally they prune them. We've talked about the difference with Japanese teas and Chinese teas, but pretty much every tea plantation will prune them, and that way they're getting constant new buds, because a lot of teas come from the new buds. So in short, new buds. What teas come from new buds? The high-end Japanese teas, matcha, gyokuro. You look at First Flush Darjeeling, Silver Needle. These are just a couple that come from the buds, or the bud set. The bud set's going to be a bud and two young flowers next to it. The prized teas typically come from this bud set. So not all of them will come from just the buds, but it might be the buds and two leaves. What are tea categories that come from very mature parts of the tea leaf, therefore having less caffeine? This is going to be like oolongs. This is going to be Lapsang Souchong, the pine smoked black. This is going to be pu'er. So those categories as a whole, like if we had to kind of generalize, it'd be those. Okay, so where are we getting it from the tea? Number two, again, no particular order, is going to be the cultivar. So the cultivar is the cultivar variant. So you think of wine. People will come and say like, hey, what kind of tea do you like to drink? I like to drink green tea. Well, it's like saying, what wine do you drink? I like to drink red wine. Well, we know there's various red wines. There's a Malbec, there's a Pinot Noir, and blah, 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 blah. Same thing for tea. So with tea, there's going to be very different cultivars or cultivation. So different brands, for lack of a better word, of green tea. So cultivars that are typically pruned a lot, cultivars that are raised or grown in higher elevations tend to have more caffeine than those in lower elevations. So you have to look at the cultivar. And number 3, fertilizer. Those that use a lot of fertilizer tend to have more growth, therefore tend to have more buds, therefore tend to have more caffeine as well. Another one, we know there's 2 varieties of Camellia sinensis. There's Camellia sinensis, the China bush. Sinensis means China. And then Camellia sinensis, Assamica. We've talked about this in various episodes. So in short, the majority of teas that are not black are going to be coming from the China bush, Camellia sinensis. And these tend to have smaller leaves. They tend to grow in colder climates, whereas Camellia sinensis, Assamica tends to have bigger leaves, tends to have a bolder taste, tends to grow more near the equator. The majority of our black tea, either iced or tea bag black tea, comes from the Assamica. The Assamica variety has up to 33% more caffeine than the China bush. So when you're looking at that, that's something to know. So if you're drinking black tea, it's probably going to have more caffeine than green and white and yellow. Now, there are going to be exceptions, like Gyokuro has intensely high tea level or caffeine levels, but as a whole. So if you're really looking at where you're getting your black teas, if it says it comes from Kenya, comes from Malawi, comes from Sri Lanka, comes from India, these are going to be Assamica varieties. They're going to have that more robust taste that's typically used in iced teas and a lot of the English blend black teas that you would find in England, Australia, here in the States. They're going to tend to have more caffeine as well. And the last one we're going to talk about today, I would say, is growing season. So places that have a faster growing season are going to have higher caffeine because, again, we're going to get more buds. They're going to prune them. They're going to pluck them. Then they're going to prune them. 3 weeks later, they're going to get more growth and so forth. So growing seasons, you're going to see places with faster growing seasons. You're going to find 2 varieties. So the Assamica bush tends to grow near the equator. And because the equator doesn't really have a cold season, the Assamica bush doesn't go dormant. So you can grow the Kenya black, the Ceylon black, a lot of these all year. And they're plucking and all year. They're just growing. So those, again, correlation with black tea as well, will tend to have more. And the last one is going to be crushed torn curl. So CTC, we talked about this in the black tea episode. I'll make sure I put a banner. So crushed torn curl, anytime the leaves are ripped up and pulverized into pretty much sawdust or what we call fannings, because they're ripped up so much or oxidized 100%, they're going to have more caffeine, because the more you rip it up, the more you're going to have caffeine because it's been pulverized so much. So the majority of tea bag teas, especially black teas, are all CTC. They're all CTC. So they're going to have more caffeine than if you're getting orthodox, which is loose leaf. So even in the black world, where you see mostly CTC done, the pulverized sawdust that you'll find in iced tea and English blends and Earl Greys, if you buy them tea bag, versus the orthodox that you'll find in black, like an orthodox Earl Grey like we have here, or an orthodox monk's blend that we have here, or whatever, the crushed tea bag variety is going to have more caffeine. So guys, I hope this helps. This is part 1. Part 2, we're going to look at some of the other factors that affect caffeine. I hope this helps. Post in the comments. Until next time, take care and God bless.